Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering.
President Biden reaffirming U.S. support for Israel after the deadly widespread attacks by Hamas. Time now for our Sunday Group. USA Today White House correspondent Francesca Chambers. Ben Domenech, the editor-at-large of The Spectator and host of the Ben Domenech podcast. Former 2020 Biden campaign surrogate Kevin Walling, and Mary Catherine Ham, columnist for Outkick. All right, we had planned to talk about a lot of things until yesterday. This was not one of them, but it is now front and center. Ben, you've heard unequivocal unanimity here in Washington about supporting Israel, but there are decisions by this administration, and there's polling that shows people are not confident in how it's handling foreign policy. It's here now, front and center.
I don't know why any American would be confident in the way that this administration is handling the foreign policy challenges that we face at the moment. I think that, going back connected to the situation in Afghanistan, which this administration absolutely bungled, turned into a debacle and got Americans killed. The fact that Ukraine has had to engage in the kind of lengthy, drawn-out process that it has in order to get F-16s and many of the other equipment that they're still being denied by this administration is certainly extending that conflict in ways that American people are frustrated with. And then we see this happen in this way and hear the denials from this administration as if money works in ways that are absolutely magical and that you can't have $6 billion injected into an Iranian regime that funds terror around the world and not have consequences because of the confidence that they have that they'll be able to pay for everything that they need going forward. There's a direct connection between what this administration is doing and death around the world and chaos that people see all over the world. And for some reason, only the White House remains in denial about its responsibility at that.
Well, Kevin, you know that when this landed on September 11th of all days, there was a lot of consternation from a number of quarters, not just the ultra-conservative and Republican voices.
Well, Shannon, I think that was so important to hear from John Feiner directly with the White House. Our own Jennifer Griffin, of course, has debunked that notion that the $6 billion has been used to fund any element of what's going on that we're seeing play out right now.
Do you understand how? No. Explain to me how money works. Explain to me how you can put $6 billion in front of you as a giant gift and then not have other money moved.
What's to say that the Iranian regime was going to fund to the $6 billion note any kind of medicine, any kind of food for their own people? We know this is a terroristic regime in Iran.
The fact-check source that you have to deny that is the president of Iran.
I'm just saying
that he's going to spend whatever he wants to spend.
There's independent verification on this Iranian money that is their own money from oil reserves. Now, having said that, I think we need to, as the president said yesterday, reestablish and refocus that element of this ironclad relationship that enjoys both bipartisan support that we're seeing. I fundamentally reject a lot of what I'm seeing on the left, for example, of my own party that says we need a ceasefire. We need to de-escalate. No calls for that were after 9/11. No calls for that were after Pearl Harbor. The Israelis, for the first time, have had their own sovereign territory invaded, something that we haven't seen since 1948. And you're seeing an administration with that statement from the president yesterday, again, declaring for the entire world that ironclad relationship that we have with Israel, and that's critically important.
This is showing up on the campaign trail, too, because we immediately heard all the GOP contenders out there saying we are with Israel, we stand with them. But interesting that former Vice President Mike Pence said this, Politico notes, in a scathing rebuke, Pence faulted, quote, voices of appeasement like Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Ron DeSantis that I believe have run contrary to the tradition in our party that America is the leader of the free world. Now, Mary Catherine, whether that's a direct quote on Israel, I mean, those candidates and the former president have made clear that they 100% support Israel. But interesting that he would try to open some daylight there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that attack to the right, particularly of DeSantis. But to your point, Kevin, I have seen messaging that says Israel can defend itself, and also it should not. We should be very clear-eyed about this. Free people have been invaded and butchered and tortured, and there are people who are in Gaza Strip who we don't know what will happen to them. And Blinken just said a few minutes ago on a show that perhaps some of them are Americans, right? So we have a really desperate situation here, but Hamas did not act out of desperation. They acted out of opportunity and enthusiasm for taking out the Jewish people and the Jewish state. And that is what is happening here. And so we need to be very clear-eyed about that on both sides.
I want to make sure, too, that we loop this in. Chad Pergram, our fantastic Capitol Hill producer and correspondent, says that this is one of those issues that highlights the fact that we don't have a speaker. Because if you got to move legislation or do something related to Israel, even the briefing of the Gang of Eight, the top Democrat and Republican leaders, when you're missing a speaker, there is a missing piece to this. And we've got a speaker fight this week to see who it's going to be.
And the White House acknowledging last night to reporters that this creates a unique situation if they were to need to go back to Congress for emergency aid because of that. As far as the Biden administration is concerned here, they have had a complicated relationship with Israel ever since Netanyahu came back into power. Recall that over the summer, he did not invite Netanyahu to the White House, even though he had the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, there. He ended up meeting with Netanyahu at the United Nations instead, rather than issuing that White House invitation. That is over domestic policy disagreements, including the judicial reform overhaul. But you again heard Biden saying last night that when it comes to the security relationship, that relationship is ironclad.
Yeah, and that I can't. Well, we know more broadly, foreign policy is going to come up in this speaker fight, even though everybody seems united on the Israel front. They got to talk about Ukraine. They got to talk about funding. You've got Steve Scalise. You've got Jim Jordan. How does this shake out, Mary Catherine?
I mean, it sure would be nice to have a functioning House right now. This is obviously going to be part of the conversation. I would hope, and I feel like I might be foolish to hope, that this would make the decision easier, that it would make people sort of get in line to line up behind whomever ends up being the speaker. I think Steve Scalise is like sort of natural progression, but Jordan has a lot of support. And again, the Biden administration says, look, there's been years of support for Israel and it's ironclad. We'll see how ironclad it is 2 weeks from now when Israel is responding. There's also been years-long deference to Iran in an attempt to negotiate with them on this nuke deal at every turn. And you don't even have to go to the $6 billion. You can go straight to the hundreds of millions poured straight into Gaza that the State Department itself, when trying to get this money there, was like, we would advise the administration that this is going to probably encourage more terrorism
within the administration.
Right, these are leaked documents that is on paper, so we don't even have to go to that money to know that we have encouraged this. And so those two things are at odds.
Well, we also have not only, it is a very real everyday concern for the people of Israel, what's going on in their borders, but our borders here now are getting a lot of attention because of a pivot. This president said, I'm not going to build another foot of the border wall. You've got DHS Secretary Mayorkas coming out saying, we need to start building a wall. The White House has said, the president has said he's had no choice in the fact that the wall construction is going to happen. He says the money's already appropriated. But Peter Doocy asked back and forth with Karine Jean-Pierre, press secretary over at the White House, you guys do oppose some things that you don't like. Why are you not fighting harder against this, which you say leaves you no choice? Here's that exchange.
You guys do this all the time. The student loans, the student loan forgiveness program, you went to court to fight for that. If this is such a problem, building 20 miles of wall, why not just go to court?
We went to Congress. The Congress appropriates the funding.
Why not fight them more?
Congress appropriates the funding. We asked them to not use that funding for that particular purpose. They denied it, and now we're complying with the law.
But Kevin, there are a number of things, including a number of border policies that they have taken to court. So unfair to say, well, we have no choice, the wall's got to happen. Or is this more about knowing that, a recent poll shows President Trump has a 24-point advantage on this president when it comes to how he's handling the border?
Well, listen, I mean, we see the optics every day of folks streaming across the border. And I think we have reached, and I've said this for a long time as a Democrat on Fox News, a crisis point with our southern border. Sometimes border walls work. Oftentimes they don't. The border has been cut into over thousands of times in terms of those steel girders. But I think it's a realization, and you saw just last week the president dispatched his Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Attorney General together to Mexico to continue to put pressure on that regime to take more action. We achieved a relationship with Venezuela, something that we haven't seen in decades, where we can repatriate Venezuelans coming across the border with expediency. So I think it's a realization that we have to do more, certainly on that border, because of the political issue as well that you point out.
We got to leave it there. We're going to have to go to pay-per-view during the commercial, so stick around. Panel, thank you very much. We'll see you next Sunday. Up next, the race for the White House. I went to Tallahassee to sit down with Governor Ron DeSantis to talk about the state of his campaign and his record in Florida. It's a Fox News Sunday exclusive next.